have I been made less free if someone kidnaps me and locks me in a room? 2 nods. Hands up if you think you've been made less free if someone kidnaps you and locks you in a room. Okay, can't do anything in a cage. Good place to start. Do you think this is a good theory of freedom? So, if we come up with a theory of freedom that doesn't say that slaves are unfree, something's wrong with our theory of freedom, right? So whatever theory we have, it has to get the right result in the case of slavery. Because they're so obviously unfree, you're owned by somebody else. But let's think about 2 other cases. So the first is a slave with a cruel master. So there's loads of interference. This master makes them work all day in the field, beats them with a stick when they don't work. From the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, they're following rules, obeying them. The second slave has a master who's really lazy, and he's off on holiday all the time. So he could do all of this stuff, but he doesn't. He makes the slave work for 2 hours a day, and the rest of the slave's time is his own. It's just not that bad. Maybe it's even better than having a job, right? Because he chooses not to exercise that power. So, is the second slave a lot more free than the first slave? Well, let's imagine maybe they didn't have to do the same amount of work. So in Miss Eva's class, everyone works for 12-hour days, right? And it's horrible. And in Miss Bella's class, it's just 2 hours and then it's lunch, and that's great. But let's say they're both teachers in the same school with the same rules. And if Miss Bella wanted, she could make you work for 13 hours a day. You know, if she woke up one morning just feeling really angry, if someone crashed into her car on the way to school and it really annoyed her, and she just beat you when she got here, and that was allowed, we might think that because you're both in the same role, in the same position, both still subject to someone with that power to interfere in your life, if they choose to do so, that you're both unfree in the same way. That is what a man called Philip Pettit thinks. But it's also this really influential school of thought, certainly in Western political thought. It's called republicanism.
Anyone heard of Homer? Not Simpson, but the original Homer. So the ancient Greek writer, poet, who told the stories of the Trojan War. Again, as you go up and down the stairs with the history timeline, there's a Trojan horse. And again, it's a quest, it's a journey. It's a fantasy story because there are again gods, magic, shape-shifting, supernatural, all sorts of things. And it becomes super famous and super popular. And then, we talked about fan fiction. This is one of the earliest surviving manuscripts of the Aeneid. The Aeneid is very much a kind of, it's not quite fanfic, but Virgil, the poet who wrote it, was a fanboy of Homer in ancient Rome. And he basically ripped off the Odyssey, about a guy who just goes all over the Mediterranean trying to get to a certain place. So in this case, Aeneas is trying to get from Troy to Rome, and it's not a straightforward journey. And again, he has to go to the underworld. He encounters magic creatures, so all sorts of weird things are happening. And again, it's not a history, it's a fantasy. But this text became the key text of the Western civilization all the way to the 20th century. People were reading this text at school, often in Latin. So it kind of formed so many great minds of the Western civilization. So basically, my point is that the way I see fantasy, it's the default mode of humanity writing about non-practical things. So, if you write about practical things like laws or receipts or whatever, it's one thing. But when you write about something else, it's almost inevitably fantasy.
But the main question is why adding information about Tuesday changes the probability. So actually this is a very good comment. So it's kind of more focused. So remember, let's go back to these two things about first child is a boy. Then we know exactly, so when we say that one of the children is a boy, we know which one. We know exactly which one. In the other extreme, where we got probability 1/3, we had absolutely no idea about which child. So we just know that a child, one of them is a boy. But now, when we throw in more and more information, it focuses more and more, so it's less and less likely that this description fits both children. It's only this intersection is the thing that fits both of them. So we are getting closer and closer to the situation where we know which child is this boy we are talking about. So this focusing is exactly changes and gets us closer and closer to the situation where we know that like first child is a boy or second child, doesn't matter.